Hi, this is Swapnil Bharti and welcome to another episode of TFI Insights. And today we have with us once again Nuritzi Sanchez, Senior Open Source Program Manager at GitLab. Nuritzi, first of all, it's good to see you again in a different role at a different company. So first of all, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. I'm really happy to be back.
Yeah, and if I'm not wrong, you joined GitLab early this year. This year has been so long, it's looked like a decade now, to be honest with you. So tell us a bit about why you joined GitLab and what has been your journey so far within the organization. What do you do there?
Sure. So I joined in February of 2020, so right before the pandemic hit. And I was really excited about this role because as I've continued my own open source journey, I think that the just full team collaboration aspect is something that I feel really passionate about. I really care about bringing in all sorts of different skill sets into open source. And in order to do that, you need to enable them with a platform, one platform to be able to all coordinate together. And at GNOME, as I previously was here as the president of GNOME, we found that it was awesome to adopt GitLab because we were able to have the engagement team using GitLab, and it was better for our newcomers. It was easier for them to actually get onboarded and start using a single tool. And so I saw those differences within our own community and felt that GitLab was a great company and platform really that I could see myself helping to make even better for open source communities. So since I joined, I've been running the GitLab for Open Source program, and I will be continuing to invest in our community, in our open source communities, to understand the needs so that we can make GitLab even better for open source software projects.
Excellent. Now, what is unique about GitLab and what I love about GitLab is that it's, first of all, fully remote company. Everybody works from remote, and they have Sid has created a very good, the handbook model where everything is transparent. Though sometimes people would say you should not have you're going public. That should not be a transparency around that. There should be some secret there. But when you bring GitLab to open source, it's a very good mix because open source community, we are used to work in a very distributed, environment where everybody, if you look at GNOME project also, your contributors are from all around the globe. They don't go to an office to work. They work in their own time. Somebody's from Germany, somebody's from India, somebody's from Africa. Even you may have Arctic and Antarctic developers. So it was a perfect match. But the reality is that as good it sounds like, it's a challenging task. You have to deal with cultural issues. You have to be very much aware about the things that can be sensitive in one culture versus other culture, time zone. A lot of things are there. So I was just looking at some of the work that you are doing. One of those is you're delivering a lot of talks also around communication hacks. So first of all, before we get into that, what I want to understand from you that what was the idea behind these sessions, these talks? Because as I said, you are fully aware of the problems that are, it's not all rosy just because it's open source, just because it's GitLab doesn't mean it's a bed of roses.
Yeah, definitely. So I think that this all kind of started with my own open source journey where I am not a developer. And so, I was unsure how best to contribute to an open source community. And I found that I had immediate impact being able to help facilitate BOF sessions or get people to fundamentally communicate better. And so, I also would observe sometimes conflicts on mailing lists or in issues. I experienced them myself, as I was trying to help make changes at GNOME. People have differences of opinion. That's totally normal. That always happens. But some people are able to better communicate it and communicate it in a way that invites collaboration versus, again, conflict or some people are just not the best at being empathetic or showing it through words. I think that written communication, you oftentimes miss the facial expressions and like the a lot of the other physical signs, and so it's sometimes also hard to interpret it correctly. And so through all of that, I was hearing more and more also that besides just having technical challenges, open source communities have people challenges. When we went through the adoption of GitLab, we were migrating from, tools that people had been using for years and years to something new. And so we got a lot of pushback. And, I saw how Carlos Soriano, who was really one of the main people leading the effort, the migration to GitLab, he had to deal with a lot of people, criticizing the move or, having differences of opinion. And so I think from there, I was able to see how we were able to successfully make a big change. And a huge part of that was, again, like the communication aspect. So that's what inspired me. And then I sometimes struggle to receiving negative feedback. And so that's something that myself I've been working on. It's a journey. I'm still in the process. And so as I was reading all of these articles or listening to podcasts and TED Talks and all of these things, I thought, it would be really awesome to share this with other people, because I've heard time and time again that it's hard to receive feedback, or it's hard to sometimes communicate cross-culturally. And so I have had this all in the back of my mind, and GitLab recently released a cross-culture communication guide. They've been working on a lot of materials to help people transition into remote work, which is what you were talking about, how it's a fully remote company. And so we have a dedicated team to remote work and making sure that that's, handled in the best way possible. And so I thought it was really great that we had this cross-culture communication guide. And so I started to read more about the book, or read the book that it was based on. And I wanted to share this with as many community members as possible, because I found some really great insights about how people communicate, about how they deliver negative feedback, about how they make decisions, like all of these things that I thought would be super useful for more people to know in order to develop empathy and to be able to communicate and collaborate better. So that's what my talk is mostly about. I have several different topics, but it all stems from the people challenges that open source communities face.
Sometimes people kind of ignore the fact that technology is always second, people are first. You're building your tools. If you look at Steve Jobs, even he said, people are the center, and then he builds technologies around them. And those are the technologies which are the most successful ones. You never put technology in the center and then people around it. And people are challenging. It's easier to solve a tech problem than a people problem. Now, especially when we look at open source world, there are a couple of things that are there. And I want to just go with you through some of these things. And number one is also that once you have been part of GNOME project and a lot of open source projects, what happens, a lot of people, they create their project out of their own need to scratch their own itch. They feel that's their baby. They feel like, hey, I'm releasing it as an open source, a free software project. I'm doing a kind of charity or making a big contribution to civilization. So I should not be held accountable. I have had some bad experiences where I'll talk to them and they'll say, hey, if you have a problem, you can suggest a patch. I'm not a developer. I cannot suggest a patch. But the thing is, that is unique with them because they are not working as part of a company's, employee where they're not accountable to that. So that also sometimes breeds into the attitude as the project goes and they become the project leader. So now there's another aspect of it is that most of these people are also introvert. They are in some cases almost at the autistic spectrum in some cases. I don't want to name any of them, but there are a lot of great open source developer leaders of the project, but they do not know how to deal with people or how to deal with community. Now, we can look at them from two perspectives. One, troublemaker, kick them out. Second is that no, they have these mental issues that we, not mental issues in negatively, but they just don't know how to deal with people, so we should help them. So how do you look at that? You don't want to take great contributors away from the project. At the same time, you don't want to hurt the project because these leaders are not good at their communication skills.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think that that's something that most open source projects struggle with, especially ones that have been around for a long time. I think that now there's been more of a move towards having codes of conduct and being able to, make sure that that the community stays healthy through that. So, I think that there's definitely a debate even with our codes of conduct, something that we should be implementing. I think that people in Europe, and I think specifically from Germany, have strong opinions around how that might not be the case. And I don't want to say all Germans, but I'm just saying that in my experience, I think because of just, I don't know, it's, I think partly because of privacy concerns and because of, I don't know, like not wanting to have too many rules. Certain cultures just feel and feeling kind of like race and culture and ethnicity are not topics that people should be even really, recording or, those are all things that factor into people's interest in having a code of conduct or not. But I think that, of course I'm American, so I kind of come naturally from the tendency of that they're good to have. The training that I've received in as part of an events organizer for codes of conduct, I can just see how it's really useful to be able to have something to refer back to when somebody files a complaint, and then you're able to then say, we've all agreed to these rules. You're not following them, therefore we need to take disciplinary action. So anyway, all of that I think is to say that I think that it's important to enforce codes of conduct. That's definitely one way to handle it. And I think that there needs to be more of an emphasis on training around people skills. So I've seen several open source organizations have implicit bias trainings or trainings also on, oh my gosh, what is it called? It's not stereotype threat, but basically some other trainings like this, imposter syndrome. But I haven't seen as many on collaborative communication, and that seems like such an essential thing that you would want everybody to learn. And as I mentioned, I'm a program manager. My whole profession is built around communication and being able to work with lots of different types of people. And even then, I still have to do my homework and research and stay up to date with the latest findings and really push myself to better understand this field. It's in many ways, that is a technical field. It's understanding the science and the research behind communication and collaboration. And so I think that this just being like making more communities aware that this is something that they should be investing in is the first thing. And then having practical trainings at conferences, at in-person events. I think that the more that people can make this a regular thing so that people don't ignore it and just go to pure technical talks, but really invest in that, soft skills or like collaboration aspect training, that's how we'll start to get more and more people to realize that they can be improving the way that they interact. You mentioned that there are some individuals that are maybe have autism or have like some disability or anything else. And I think that I've seen people, like I went to Stanford and I have a few friends who self-identified as being on the spectrum. And one of my friends said that he found it so difficult to understand people's body language and everything that he had to train himself. He created a spreadsheet and he really like mapped things in terms of like, when somebody does this, I should react in this way. And he trained himself. And now I think he's, when you meet him, you wouldn't know that he has this because he's very socially adept. He's able to, really communicate well. And so I think that it's partly fostering an interest in this and recognizing people for those skills so that it becomes more mainstream or like more regular to invest in that skill set in open source specifically. And especially because it's, again, remote and it's cross-cultural and all this stuff. So, and now more than ever, because it's such an important part of our like ecosystem, our software ecosystem in general, where most companies these days use open source. And so, it's dependent on it. It's something that it's really crucial for us to have great quality software. And for that, you need to have strong, healthy communities that continue to do this long beyond just the, life cycle of one person. So, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, your open source project is will sustain not because of one person, but because of the people who will come after that as well. And as businesses rely on these projects, it cannot just go away tomorrow. You talked about helping people for the collaborative model. What about inviting new people who do not feel comfortable because they don't see a lot of people who look like them within the community? It could be underrepresented minority, it could be gender, it could be racial, it could be cultural, because the fact is that just because you have a particular skill tone does not mean suddenly that is your home. For example, you are right now in Germany. The way German thinks is different than the way French, Italian. I mean, there are so many jokes when you talk to Europeans. They have so many jokes about themselves. So you will not feel at home within those communities just because you have the same skin tone. Now you can talk about, we are talking region, then you can talk about different ethnic background also, where people may not feel comfortable because the discussions that are going on there, they cannot relate to them or the way people talk. So how to make your community inclusive, irrespective of whether the person is black or white or brown or yellow or whatever color, blue, green, pink, or whether you are male, female, you don't identify yourself with a specific gender, whether it's LGBT community. Basic idea is that it doesn't matter who you are. You should feel welcome in that community. How to do that?
Yeah, that's a tough one. I think, though, that...
Do you think I will be asking easy questions to you?
I mean, I was hoping, but no. Great. I love them. I think that it's so important for, as you said, for people to be able to see themselves represented in the community. And I'm just reminded by a very recent experience at the GNOME Foundation, where... So I'm one of the organizers of the Linux App Summit. It's a co-hosted conference between GNOME and KDE. And during that summit, we really wanted to have more women participate. We reached out to a mailing list called Sisters, which is by the Anita B. Foundation. And we had quite a few women interested in participating. They didn't feel comfortable speaking, but they wanted to at least volunteer or do something to be involved in the conference. And so there were a few women that reached out to me directly, which is something, first of all, that I thought was really interesting, where they didn't want to reply publicly on the mailing list. It was really about the personal connection. And then we direct messaged, for a bit before they were comfortable applying for sponsorship. It was an in-person event back in the day when that actually happened. And so, they needed travel sponsorships. We found a higher amount of them. And so then we had people participate in this. There were two women from Africa who ended up joining us. And one of them was just so excited about GNOME and continuing. She started to participate in GNOME's engagement team, wanted to organize the first ever conference in Africa, organized something called the Pan-African GNOME Summit, which sadly had to become a virtual event, not an in-person event. But she ended up forming a team there who is doing a lot of outreach in Africa now and getting, a lot of the awesome tech talent across various countries there interested in GNOME. And this woman was recently elected to the GNOME Board of Directors. And about 3 or 4 people from the GNOME Africa group ended up joining as GNOME Foundation members, which I don't think that we've had any, or certainly not much representation from Africa in the past, definitely not since I've joined. And so this has all been incredibly positive change for us. And all of that started with one person from Africa being like, hey, I'm Nigerian and I'm here at GNOME and I'm, excited to start this. And then more people started identifying with her from Africa and started to also want to participate and also join. And so I think, again, it shows that by having somebody that's publicly visible and doing great stuff, by celebrating them and by spotlighting them, you're able to then show the world that they're part of your community. They might be a very small part, but I think it's still important to show that so that others also start to identify that with, that person. They might identify from other aspects, maybe not just because they're African, but maybe because they're a woman or because they're another underrepresented minority. And so those stories build up, and then you're able to, show people that you have the culture that allows people to, from a total newcomer, become a board of director pretty, certainly with hard work, but, that is even possible. And so, I think to what you asked before, I think it's about creating a culture where change is possible, where there's open-mindedness, friendliness. Another thing that we did at GNOME, or what we're trying to do even more of, is focus on the newcomer story and have a dedicated team to the onboarding or newcomer experience. I know that Sri Ramakrishna, who you might know, is helping to do a scalable onboarding program at GNOME. And so it's really about focusing on that and having like a welcoming committee from the very beginning. Companies have HR departments and people departments that are focused on the people aspect of joining a company because there's transition. The people will have questions and, it takes time to adjust to a culture, and you need to, have materials for people to read and point them out to the right places so that they're able to be productive. And so I think that the same type of thing should be done within open source communities. And we should be encouraging people who are, part of people's teams, HR teams, etc., to join our communities and to help us through those challenges. I know I'm certainly not part of that, but I'm trying to learn more. And it's, like a whole departments of companies are dedicated to this. So it's important.
Since you are part of GitLab, you're now in a position where you can also be a vector of influence. You're not just part of a community, you're also part of a community. And I often, whenever I talk to Greg and Linda and all those people, and sometimes what happens is that when you are purely a community, you are not hiring people, you're not hiring developers. You can be welcoming to new developers. You can have, all those, code of conduct and everything else, but you have only so much say and influence. But when you are part of a company, you can dictate a lot of things. You can build culture within your company. You can also invest resources, because how you hire people, how you encourage your employees to become more inclusive. So can you talk about some of the work that is going on within GitLab, because all you guys deal with is open source. So how are you helping some of these causes? Can you talk about some of those efforts?
Yeah, sure. So I mean, I think that it still goes back to the company valuing these things of diversity is one of our core values. More than any other company I've been part of, like GitLab really talks about its values often. It has an acronym credit, and like we really invest in people as like the entire package, not just like the work professional side of people. And I think that that trickles into, every aspect of the company and certainly into our community. So, yes, we have a code of conduct, but just like when we interact with people, like one of the things that we're encouraged to do is to show our gratitude and to really thank people. And so we've infused our own community with that, where we, take time to say thank you to somebody for submitting a merge request, or, there's this general attitude that that we employees use that within our own team, that we then extend to the community and foster that actively. So I would say that that's one of those things. Other than that, like we're also experiencing a lack of diversity in contributors, and that's actually something that I'm really excited to help tackle. I think that we have several programs within the community relations team, and code contributors has been the entire, like it has an entire resource dedicated to that. And while we don't have as much gender diversity, one of the things that we've found is we have age diversity, where we have small children. Like I think a 5-year-old submitted a merge request the other day, or it's just incredible. Like a lot of people are getting their children involved in using GitLab and contributing to GitLab. And so I think that we're doing some things right, and I think the entire team really cares about diversity and inclusion. And so our next step is to, along with the journey that our company is taking in terms of diversity and inclusion, we're also thinking about that for the community itself. And at GitLab Commit, we had an entire track dedicated to everyone can contribute. And so I think that that's really what we're after, is showing that no matter what your skill set is, no matter what your expertise or how comfortable you are with the platform, even, we're here to support you. We're here to help you through your first contribution, and we want to help.
Nuritzi, thank you so much for taking your time out today and talk about this very, it's a serious topic. It's also a very uncomfortable topic. You cannot talk about it comfortably. So thanks for, dealing with my questions, and I look forward to talk to you again.
Awesome. Thank you so much too. It's always a pleasure being on your show and getting to talk to you. So I hope to do so again.